Mr Speaker, I rise today to speak on an important issue for our state, and this important issue is education. It is not an exaggeration to say that the future of our state, it is in the hands of our younger people and the education they receive. Education helps to reduce inequalities and to reach gender equality. It empowers people to live more healthy and sustainable lives. In talking about the importance of education, the United Nations identified that education is the basic building block of every society. It is the single best investment countries can make to build prosperous, healthy and equitable societies. Those who leave school at an early age are vulnerable to unemployment, poverty, early marriage and pregnancy. Some of the factors that fuel the dropout rates include poverty, gender, disability, traumatic family events, as well as a perceived low return on investment for education from various governments. Mr Speaker, in preparing my notes for today, I thought about my journey and how I came to be standing here today and have this fantastic opportunity to represent my community. Mr Speaker, I could not have been in this position and I couldn't have achieved this without good education. An education I have received from a young age, which has helped me develop resilience, build a career and travel places. I believe it is one of the best gifts a child can be given after they are born. Mr Speaker, the question is good education all about money? And I would say no, it isn't all about the money. It is also about quality and best practice. In its 2023-24 state budget, the government is providing $8.9 billion over the forward estimates. This is a significant amount of money for our state. On the 23rd of August, the NAPLAN results were released, and it showed that Tasmania came second last in the average score. I take this opportunity to refer to Dr. Lisa Denny's recent article. Dr. Denny is a well-known workforce demographer and also is an adjunct professor, associate professor with the Institute for Social Change, University of Tasmania, a founding member of the Tasmanian 100% Literacy Alliance, a member of the expert panel for the Centre of Population Australian Treasury. Dr. Denny wrote in her opinion piece after the NAPLAN results were published the following: "There is no clearer evidence, no greater wake-up moment than today's NAPLAN results for literacy and numeracy in Tasmania. We must transform our education system and literacy and numeracy teaching practices to be informed by and aligned to the science of reading and the science of learning, structured literacy instruction and explicit teaching practices." In 2013, then opposition leader Will Hodgman said statistics showing that half of Tasmania's population is functionally illiterate are shameful, and that a Liberal government would boost literacy and numeracy rates in school in 6 years to at least the national NAPLAN standard. When Will Hodgman became Premier in 2014, he stated that education is at the heart of his vision for the state. Since then, while some literacy and numeracy outcomes in Tasmania have improved marginally, Tasmania remains below the national average NAPLAN score in each domain for each year group and is the worst performing state in all but 2 of the 20 indicators. I end the quote. On the 7th of September, in response to a Dorothy Dixer question, Minister Jentsch was very quick to point out that the poor NAPLAN results recorded by Tasmania had nothing to do with the government's failure to implement good education strategy. I quote from the Minister's response: "The very strong advice from the Australian Curriculum Assessment and Reporting Authority is that because of these changes, NAPLAN results for 2023 should not be compared to results from previous years. They measure different things. This is an important part of the changes to NAPLAN in 2023 and should not be characterised as education outcomes going backwards. To do so is misleading and it is wrong to make that claim," he said. Mr Speaker, I believe the Minister tried to embellish the picture and make it look this was nothing to do with the government dropping the ball on education. Going back to Dr Denny's article, one can see that Minister Jentsch's argument doesn't add up. Dr Denny said, I quote, "In 2023, the Australian Curriculum Assessment and Reporting Authority introduced new proficiency measures for NAPLAN, replacing the previous bans which had existed since 2008 that categorised students as either below, at or above the national minimum standards. For many years, it has been argued that these standards were set too low, and I'll refer also to the Grattan Institute that highlighted this, and that those students categorised as at the national minimum standards were still likely to require additional intervention to enable them to achieve their potential. The new proficiency measures are intended to better reflect expected levels by year group. The standards are set at a challenging but reasonable expectation of what students know and can do at the time of testing. That is, demonstrate their required knowledge and skills up to the point in time of the NAPLAN test for each domain, she said. Fact is, Mr Speaker, that even if we do not compare this year with last year's results, Tasmania remains below the national average, and it is the worst performing state in all but 2 out of the 20 indicators. This year's results, the first to be assessed under a tougher, revamped set of criteria, also showed 1 in 10 students are so far behind they need additional support, and kids from lower socioeconomic areas continue to lag behind their peers. Despite significant spending, students have been sliding down global rankings in literacy and numeracy in Australia and here at home. In trying to build a positive narrative around the NAPLAN results, Minister Jentsch said in his answer to the Dorothy Dixer question that, I quote, "There are around a third of students assessed as developing or needing additional support. Importantly, this is consistent with the national trend," he said. In fact, the 2023 national report clearly shows that Tasmanian results are statistically comparable with Australian average results in reading at every year level. End the quote. Well, Mr Speaker, this is now my translation in plain English of what the Minister said. The Minister basically said, or is arguing, that compared to the rest of the country, our less than impressive results are not too bad because they are relatively on par with the less than impressive results from other states. Or, otherwise said, we're just as bad as the others. And this is my summing up in plain language of what the Minister said. It is important to highlight the government is aware of the need to improve our literacy and numeracy. The government has been aware for a while now of the need to change direction, and that our education practices which have not been delivered at structured literacy and explicit teaching needed to be turned around without delay. In a media release on the 12th of March 2021, the then Education Minister, Jeremy Rockliff, said, "While we are continuing to build on progress that has been made, there is still a long way to go. We need to pick up the pace. I want to see our rate of improvement accelerated. That's why I'm announcing an ambitious new target that by Year 7 all students will meet an expected reading standard that is above the national minimum and by no later than 2030. Which, by the way, Mr Deputy Speaker, I think setting a target for 2030 is really leaving this for too long and too late. This is 7 years away, and what it tells me is that the government is in no hurry to make this a priority. And, Mr Deputy Speaker, I don't want to remind people about the elephant in the room, but it seems to me that there is more rush to get a stadium built and to build it in a faster time frame than actually achieving our reading standards for all Year 7 students. The Premier continued then by saying that, as we know, phonics is essential for children to become successful readers and spellers, writers, in the early years of schooling. Starting this year, all government schools will have evidence-based phonics instruction in place from prep to Year 2. A guide is being developed for teachers, which will be available in Term 2. The Year 1 phonics check will provide an initial indication for teachers to inform the provision of supports, whilst the progressive achievement test will be a further tool to identify where more intense targeted support is needed. If we are to achieve our aspirational goal, the Premier said, for all Tasmanians to be functionally literate, we need to recognise that literacy is a whole of community issue and work together across government, industry and community. That is why I'm also pleased to announce we will establish an expert advisory panel to oversee the development of a community-wide framework to achieve a literate Tasmania. This group will undertake a review of the current literacy programs and supports across our community and provide recommendations on how we can continue to improve our approach, the Education Minister said. So what happened next, Mr Deputy Speaker? Fast forward 2 years later, and the Premier announced on the 6th of June this year that the government's Literacy Advisory Panel has now delivered its final report outlining recommendations to reach the aspirational goal of 100% functional literacy. The report outlines 23 priorities recommendations for lifting literacy in Tasmania and provides a community-wide framework. Our government wants every Tasmanian child to have the best possible opportunities in life, and our clear goal is for Tasmania to have 100% functional literacy, the Premier said. That's why we have accepted all of the priority recommendations, with $6.5 million over 4 years allocated in the 23-24 budget to start this important work. An independent literacy outcome monitoring group, including a person with expertise in outcomes measurement, at least one Tasmanian with lived experience, and a representative from the Australian Education Research Organisation, will be established to monitor progress and outcomes. Members of this group will be selected through an expression of interest process, which I expect to be finalised by September 2023, which is just around the corner, Mr Deputy Speaker. The Department of Premier and Cabinet will develop the first 3-year implementation plan by later this year, which again, it's soon coming, in close consultation with the education and community sectors. The government will also ensure that 25% of primary schools across Tasmania are implementing structured literacy for K2 in 2024, with all primary schools to be implementing structured literacy by 2026. The Year 1 phonics check will also be implemented in every school in Term 3 this year, with statewide aggregated results to be made public before the end of the year. Further announcements in relation to the first 3-year implementation plan will be made before the end of the year, the Premier said. Mr Deputy Speaker, I have read a good part of the Premier's June media release because it makes several promises. These items, which I have included in my motion, which is motion 177, are extremely important. I believe the House should receive an update from the Minister. The end of the year is fast approaching, and we do not know how much progress the Department has made in fulfilling the Premier's promises. In a media statement released after the NAPLAN results were published on the 23rd of August, Minister Jensch said that all students in Tasmania from Prep to Year 2 will be explicitly taught phonics using a systematic approach by 2026. However, Mr Deputy Speaker, there was no mention in the Minister's statement of the 25% goal by year 2024. This is why we need some clear answers from the Minister. Are these goals shifting? Why was this left out, and is the Department missing the deadlines? Mr Deputy Speaker, there are genuine concerns, and we would like to make sure the Minister is being transparent about how his department is approaching the process. As another example of concern, the Department for Education, Children and Young People went to tender in July 2023 for training packages for structured literacy and tiered supports. The contract was supposed to be finalised by 1st of August, but apparently negotiations are still continuing. The Tasmanian 100% Literacy Alliance has raised concerns with the Premier about this process and the apparent provider, Deakin University. I quote from the concerns raised by the Alliance. We would have expected that a strategic implementation plan for a system-wide whole school tiered approach would have been developed prior to tendering for a training package. We fear that training package is proxy for system-wide whole school, and that a training package with resources will not achieve the objective you have set. Another concern raised by the Alliance. Deakin University does not have a record for expertise in evidence-based structured literacy. While Deakin University may have presented a proposal in partnership or a consortium, we would like assurances that the team members within the Deakin University bid have a record of expertise in structured literacy and explicit teaching practices and in delivering high-quality professional learning to educators in these fields. And another concern, the evaluation criteria for this tender only placed a weighting of 30% on the expertise and experience in providing structured literacy and MTSS professional learning. We believe this is too low, as this expertise is critical to achieving your stated objectives. The expertise needed to achieve these objectives is contained to a small group of people, organisations and institutions in Australia who specialise in the science of reading and, critically, are not located in Tasmania. Yet the social and economic benefit to the state criterion was weighted at 25%, precluding the expertise we so need in the state to facilitate long-term social and economic benefits. I'm not sure, Mr Deputy Speaker, if the Premier has addressed these concerns raised by the Alliance. This is why we need some confirmation from the Minister that things are going according to plan. On the 28th of February this year, the Premier, together with the Minister for Education, issued a media statement with the Premier saying that when it comes to schooling, the evidence is very clear about the benefits of a whole-of-system approach to and whole-of-school implementation of synthetic phonics, which is learning to read by breaking up words into sounds, he said. The Premier also added that all schools should be using the National Phonics Check in Year 1 and this will now be a requirement. Well, Mr Deputy Speaker, this is very interesting. I can actually relate to this from my personal experience. I have learned English through phonics. I also have learned French through phonics. So I learned both languages in separate countries that are not considered economically first world countries. So that is a perfect example how phonics works. As a community, we should worry greatly that many businesses and organisations lament school leavers not being able to read and write, particularly apprentices. TAFE must spend a significant amount of dollars in literacy and numeracy programs, which is essentially providing the instruction that young people should have received in school. How many students are receiving literacy and numeracy support through TAFE? How much of the TAFE budget is spent on this? What is the lost productivity and cost to businesses who not only have to train their apprentices in a chosen field, but also on literacy and numeracy? These are very important questions, Mr Deputy Speaker. Mr Deputy Speaker, we need nurses, we need carers, we need teachers. How are we going to fulfil this growing need in our workforce if our younger generation is not equipped with reading and writing skills? How do we empower people? The gap between the rich and the poor will widen. How can we expect people to keep a roof over their head or make an informed choice about their nutrition and health when they cannot read or write? How about basic home budgeting, Mr Deputy Speaker? Something else to consider, Mr Deputy Speaker, is government departments produce glossy brochures after glossy brochures with a lot of information about how people can access this service or that service, but they do not actually realise how many times charities had to unpack information for those in desperate need who are knocking on their door. You can write an Encyclopaedia Britannica of instructions in a pamphlet. It means nothing for people that cannot read or write. We want the Minister to give us confidence to reassure the community that there is an evidence-based, structured approach to literacy in all Tasmanian primary schools, as promised. What we do not need is a game of pass the parcel like the one we have witnessed during budget estimates when the Minister and his Secretary of the Department did their best to give the most convoluted yes minister type answers. And please, let's not hide anymore behind fake outrage. It is a tired and childish strategy. I refer to the Minister's answer to the Dorothy Dixer question, who said that it was disrespectful and disingenuous to the efforts of students and teachers in Tasmanian school to highlight that we are the worst state on 18 out of 20 indicators. I mean, like, seriously. So MPs are not to ask any questions about poor performance or poor results because the Minister has decreed we are disrespecting somebody. We just want straight, transparent answers. I would have thought the last few months are a clear indication that the members of this House will pursue transparency and clear information. I will quote from my colleague, Mr. Tucker, "No more hiding behind the bureaucratic wall of BS. In the interest of good governance, let's have accountability and start dismantling these walls that have surrounded governments for years now." In conclusion, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I look forward to the Minister providing some clear answers to the questions that have been raised.
Minister,
I thought we agreed that I would get rid of my one.